So this one is going to be a little different. As the title suggests, we are going to be discussing what ArenaNet has done right in Guild Wars 2 and what I hope we see more of, or a more refined version of, in Guild Wars 3. Realistically, the state of Guild Wars 2 is disheveled, to say the least, so I would rather look forward into what Guild Wars 3 has to offer us as a community. Before we discuss that, some of the people did not like the Lies of P gameplay footage in the background, so I have some real riveting Guild Wars 2 gameplay footage in the background for you guys this time, so I hope you enjoy that. Ask and you shall receive. Anyways, first on my list is World versus World. This game type is unique to Guild Wars 2, and while it isn't really a unique concept of that big battle structure, the World versus World structure really does shine in its fundamental concept, like the triple 50 versus 50 versus 50 fight. This is actually a much broader version of the 12 versus 12 alliance battle system from Guild Wars 1, and you can definitely see the similarities and influence. And this was even more true during the launch of the game, because you actually needed to play World versus World and be invested in World versus World to complete your PvE map completion to get that gift of exploration. So either you had to wait out map rotations and hoped that you ended up in an area that you didn't have yet, or you actually got good at the game and you captured what you needed. This was later changed, and it definitely impacted the amount of investment that PvE players were willing to devote to World versus World. And I mean, gift of battle is still a requirement, so there still is some reason for the PvE gang to hit up World versus World, but it's just not quite the same as actually needing to go out and target objectives. So in short, World vs. World is good, right? Everyone loves it, but how can it be made better, and what would I like to see ArenaNet do in Guild Wars 3 to allow this game mode to live on in the new title? Well, what I would like to see, and what I hope ArenaNet learned, was that they do some kind of implementation for teams to no shit compete to actually try to win the match. As it stands right now, there's no real benefit from being a tier 1 world or a trash tier world, and the actual win incentives are often contrary to what most World vs. Worlders are interested in. And by that I mean PvT is highly incentivized. Not only that, they did recently change the whole time of capture mechanic. It impacted the influence that Oceania players had on the World vs. World matchup. So essentially, if the Oceania players were playing during their prime time, it was worth less points just because everybody in North America was asleep, type of deal. And there was really some metagame strategy going into how to matchups by basically night capping and all this stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on about that. But in short, capping stuff, the towers and the keeps, is a primary way to get points in World vs. World. And these skirmishes between different fight guilds and Zergs and stuff, those are secondary. Both aspects are important for a world to be a winning one. I mean, you have Maguma that will PvT you to death and then spawn camp you, right? In short, it's a balancing act between capturing things and fighting other players, and you need to find that happy balance to incentivize both things. Oftentimes people will cloud around objectives or organize fights between two Zergs in a pseudo-organized group, and then you have PvTers that just kind of run around and focus on camping objectives. I think these segmented philosophies need to be blended, and I mean like forcibly blended. There have been other suggestions to modify this game mode and have actual PvE aspects to this game mode, and I think that would be great to steal some of the ideas from MOBAs, for instance, to keep things balanced. In short, basically each team would have minions that go between different objectives, or NPC little skirmishes that fight amongst themselves if nobody's around, and you could essentially push these objectives through the use of NPCs, and then those NPCs would be able to either break open siege gates or so on, so that way it gives smaller players a way of impacting the larger overall map. You know, imagine if roamers didn't just roam and fight solo or do 2v2 scrims and stuff around the map, but if they could also push these little NPC lanes into different areas. It opens up a different level of strategy in the game mode. You could also use special tactivators to summon like a legendary mob that would need to be dealt with, or they could do significant damage to a structure. And I think that would be cool to see like Doom roll up and like one-shot Bay Wall if he was allowed to get there. Maybe this could be like a comeback mechanic or something along those lines. And when we talk about World vs. World, I want to express that the idea has survived for such a long time and is one of the most active game modes in the game. The next thing on my list is looking more towards the PvE side of the house, and I think that ArenaNet needs to hard focus on the party level and the guild level content primarily. I believe that the traditional dungeon aspects were great and all, but I think in terms of resources and flexibility of like story and expandability, sticking with the newest version of fractals as the primary end game would be excellent. It's easier to coordinate, easier to pug, and easier to develop than something like raids. I mean, finding like 4 friends and holding them accountable is significantly easier than finding 10 or 20. And as far as guilds go, there absolutely has to be guild versus guild in Guild Wars 3. I think this can be sectioned into a 10 versus 10, a 15 versus 15, and a 20 versus 20 type structure based on guild sizes. So essentially you have your light, medium, and heavyweight tiers, and we could see how that's received and adjusted accordingly. But you should have the guild arenas be the guild hall, and that is a concept from Guild Wars 1 that they had where these 2 guild halls would kind of mesh in a way, and you would basically fight on one of these guild maps. And I think that the use of guild halls in that way actually increases their value. They don't just become an aesthetic for your guild, they actually serve a purpose. As far as guild level PvE, Guild Wars 3 ideally would feature unique guild fights, and these would be your replacements for traditional raids. You could follow a similar scaling with 10, 15, and 20-man fights. Maybe the 10-man version of the encounter would be easy, 15 would be like CM level, and 20 would be LCM level, or like a Savage, Mythic, and Mythic Plus type structure, but with just player limits. Locking the raid stuff behind guilds would actually incentivize players to engage with guilds. And I think that that is something that is lacking in Guild Wars 2 that can be pretty easily remediated. Like, the core essence of these two ideas is that ArenaNet has really good ideas in terms of content, but they have a bad way of incentivizing player cooperation or player interaction. And having certain things in place that incentivize players to be active within a community, it gives levels of prestige on both the PvE side and PvP side for being in a guild and being good at the game. In World vs. World, and it incentivizes strategic thinking and planning out both offensive and defensive teams and coordinating between them. Like the fact that the World vs. World strategy is just like, hey, we'll build a big old group and just ram it into everything. It's kind of boring. Now for this next thing on my list, this isn't necessarily what ArenaNet did right, but it is something that I really hope they learn their lesson on. And I'm going to call this little part development bloat. As nice as it is to have a game with a ton of different crafting systems, a ton of different ways to get the same gear or items, or a ton of different skills and traits and specializations, it becomes incredibly overwhelming for the developers to manage effectively. In Guild Wars 1, every expansion they released, factions, and Nightfall, they released 2 new classes, a bunch of armor sets, and a bunch of new skill options for both regular skills and elite skills. Had Guild Wars 1 continued that path, there would be thousands of skills that needed to be balanced, and that is one of the main problems that Guild Wars 2 is facing now. With the existing 3 elite specs and various weapons and interactions with all the traits and skills and runes and sigils and gear types and so on, it becomes a nightmare to try to keep all things in line without there being an outright overpowered meta in PvE or an outright broke oppressive meta in PvP. One of my hopes is that ArenaNet learn to keep things as lean as possible and consider the development costs in the long term. Don't do the spring cleaning and release a brand new game only to fall into the same old habit of implementing new systems, abandoning them, only to implement a new system again, only to abandon it again. This is a problem we see in real life where engineers don't consider the maintainability of their designs. You know, I think we've all worked on cars at some point in our life. To give an example, my brother, he has a Chrysler, and you need to take the front driver's side wheel off to even change the battery. And that is what these game devs are doing with their game with some of these systems. There should be ways to slow roll these features in and change things out to ensure that they are fully cooked on implementation and sustainable in the long term. If new items or features get added, they should be iterated on the existing systems instead of just adding new ones over and over. And just like last week, I'm going to get into the comments and add some more context, reply to some of your statements. A couple of people took away that I was implying that I wanted FOMO in my game, or that we were cooked because you can't even play a game without FOMO in it, and so on. And realistically, I wanted more meaningful goals or time-limited events with engaging rewards. I brought up the semi-frequent return to or rush events, and my issue with them is that the rewards aren't engaging enough. They don't need to be FOMO rewards. All they would really have to do to fix the rush event engagement would be to add like a rush vendor. Like, imagine if the rush events had a currency associated with them and the rush vendor sold regular stuff like ascended weapon boxes or mystic coins for general trade-ins. But if you wanted a super high roll item like a confetti infusion, it would cost you like 20,000 rush tokens. Capping these rush weeks out to like 2k tokens per rush event, or even 1k tokens, it would incentivize people to play them frequently for their rewards, incentivize people to engage with the content for the rush event. A lot of people who play a lot of fractals, they'll just do the fractal rush. If they're not PvPers, they're not going to do the PvP rush. But if you want to work towards a endgame infusion, or if you want the extra money from mystic coins, it might be enough without having to structure these rush events with their own individual rewards. You could have this vendor that has everything available to it, and so that way if you do miss one, or you do really hate PvP, or you do really hate doing fractals or raids or something, then you can choose not to engage with that one and just miss out on a little bit of extra currency. It would also give the power to the player to actually work towards what they wanted. So in short, there is a way to incentivize players to engage with the content without it being FOMO. Guys Being Dudes mentioned that there needs to be more engagement for endgame players, and I feel like that is where the community engagement aspect comes from. In short, ArenaNet is mommy and daddy, and they are having to constantly play and entertain the kids. With proper community features that allow the kids to play together with each other on the play date, it allows mommy and daddy to get to work and buy us new toys to play with. This was highlighted by another commenter, Moojade, where they talked about the importance of a guild and how that impacted how they engage with the game. And I understand this, and I want to see meaningful ways to engage with other players in Guild Wars 3. Valen stopped by and he mentioned that ArenaNet shouldn't try to be WoW and shouldn't try to be anything other than what they are, because that is the way Guild Wars 2 monetization is structured, and instead they should focus on their core audience. And while I want to agree with you here that I think that they should not try to be WoW or try to be Final Fantasy or try to be those other things, I must disagree with you about the core audience. They should focus on their core audience, but that's not what they've been doing. It is clear that ArenaNet does not really understand who their core audience is. In Janther Wilds, the raid was largely a flop. The open world got unrepeatable slop. Push did not revitalize PvP. World vs. World alliances are still missing in action, and the story beats are at an all-time low. What in the last 2 years of content gives anyone the impression that they are catering to their core audience? I don't mean this as a slight, and I would love to say, oh yeah, Guild Wars 2 shouldn't try to be WoW. They should focus on their core audience. Okay, like, is the core audience in the room with us right now? Like, where is Guild Wars 2's core audience? Realistically, Guild Wars 2's core audience is casual players, open world players, World vs. World players. And the open world has been bad. World vs. World has been neglected. And I guess the casual scene is really the only one that gets anything, just because they don't engage with a lot of the systems at a high level. But this sentiment was also highlighted by a few other individuals in more blunt terms than others. There's this dude with no name. Sorry, I don't I don't know what to say about it. There's no name that shows up. He talked about developers thinking that they know what gamers want more than the gamers themselves, which in some cases is true. Like, I believe that a lot of people will say a million things, and then when they get what they want, they're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted. And I do believe to some extent ArenaNet does believe this. And the only reason that gives me that impression is that they don't act on player feedback in most cases. Indy68 and Silky Smooth 30 FPS took shots at ArenaNet, which honestly I find hilarious. I love to see it. It's all memes. For me, I actually sent your comments to some of my friends and laughed about it, so I had to highlight it here. Now, real quick, I'm going to give a little bit more context. I did post a poll on my page about if I stopped making Guild Wars 2 videos and blah, blah, blah. And frankly, I was happy to see how balanced the results were. And the reality is there is an option for non-Doom Guild Wars 2 videos. My thoughts about Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet on the most meta level is based around the limitations of the studio. And my view is largely speculative on how I believe the studio is run. I've said it before where I think that the Guild Wars 2 team right now is the junior varsity B-string team of developers that ArenaNet has. There might be some talent there, but they are limited in their capacity, right? So I don't think Cal is a bad dude. I don't think Roy or any of these guys are bad devs, but they don't have the resources to do the things that they need to do. And I believe that the real talent, right, the real resources, the real heavy hitters at the studio are being used to develop Guild Wars 3 or whatever the unannounced project is. There is a significant amount of people who completely neglect Expansion 6. Like, Expansion 6 has negative hype around it because everyone kind of already knows that it's gonna be mid. Like, even if we get full elite specs, even if we get some new open world meta maps, it might be better than Janthir Wilds, it might be better than Soto, but it's probably gonna be mid. However, in Guild Wars 3, like, Guild Wars 3 could be anything, right? It's a clean slate, Unreal Engine 5, you know? And I think the hope comes from most people's understanding that many of the systems in Guild Wars 2 would be better served by complete revamps or overhauls, to the point that it's like, oh, instead of fixing what's there, just delete it and start over. And that's where Guild Wars 3 comes in. That's where the Guild Wars 3 hope comes in. Like, we all hope that there are these elements of Guild Wars 2 that we enjoy that can live on, but without the jank, with a fresh coat of paint, with a more modern feel. So it's not all doom and gloom from here. It's just my honest thoughts about the game. But with that, I want to thank you for watching. A big thanks to all of my subscribers. We just broke 6.5K, so big ups to all of you guys. And a special thanks to all of my members who support the channel. Your $1 mean more to me than you know. Thanks again, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.